Hello and welcome to Business Connections, a program put on by the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Holly Allen. I'm Director of Marketing and Communications for the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce. And today we're talking about infrastructure. It's something that many of us don't even think about, the roads and bridges we cross every day to go to work or to school. We just expect them to be there and to be in good condition. But this country is facing an infrastructure crisis right now. In some cases, some of those bridges have gone largely untouched for 50 plus years. In fact, according to an article that was published by the Dayton Daily News just in mid-June, there is a major bridge repair backlog, one that the American Road and Transportation Builders Association estimates to be at $106 billion nationwide. That's 1,525 miles of bridges. With me today to talk about that issue is Deputy Director of District 7 of the Ohio Department of Transportation, Randy Chevalley. And thank you for being with us. And Vice President of Public Policy and Economic Development for the Dayton Area Chamber of Commerce, Chris Kershner. Thank you for your time today, gentlemen. Randy, I'll start with you. $106 billion in backlog bridge repairs. Can you talk about the Dayton region? So we're looking at this nationwide. What's going on in the Dayton region? What is ODOT working on in your district?
Well, I think in the Dayton region since about 2005, we've had almost an investment of $550 million, mainly on the interstates, which we're very fortunate. There's a lot of competition statewide. And with the help of Chris's organization and others, talking to people who make those decisions on priorities statewide, I think we've done pretty good. Some major projects we've got going on now are 75 modernization. We call it the downtown project. Final phase is ongoing. They're working diligently. We're hoping that's completed by 2017.
So Randy, are you saying in 2017, no more orange barrels on 75?
We won't know where we are.
Yeah.
Great question, and I've learned that we'll always have orange barrels. As soon as we finish that project, we actually, when that project was conceived, we tried to get more going up and down the pipeline, down to Edwin C. Moses, clear up to Wagner Ford. But you can only fund so much at a certain time. So those other bridges are getting to be 50, 60 years old. So we're in the design phases of those projects. And so, Chris, those orange barrels will just continue up and down the corridor because those bridges and things are going to need repaired also.
And Chris, you personally are pretty familiar with that project as well because the Chamber got involved in getting the funding for that project. Can you talk about that and why this issue is important to the Chamber to begin with?
Absolutely. Yeah, for a while the the Dayton region received almost $0 of transportation investments. And this was before 2000, from really the 1990 to 2000 time range. And we were hearing from the business community that we needed to have stronger infrastructure and interstate investments in this area. It was part of our economic attractiveness as a region. It allowed for their consumers to be able to access their facilities. It allowed for their employees to be able to better access their facilities, and it really is one of the things that makes our community stand out. Not a lot of regions can state that you can really get anywhere in the region in about 30 minutes, give or take a couple orange barrels or a couple fender benders. But you can pretty much get anywhere around this region in about 30 minutes. That's a nice attribute. Folks in Washington, D.C. can't say that. Folks in Chicago can't say that. Heck, folks in Cincinnati can't say that. So right. it's a nice attribute that we have that we use to market the region. So in 2000, the Chamber launched a strategic campaign to try to get more interstate and infrastructure investments in this region. And one of the major projects was the I-75 modernization project. It's something the Chamber lobbied for hard to get done. And once we got that achieved, we knew that this was something that had to get done and had to get done quickly for the business community. For those that maybe either grew up in this area, were here over about 20 years ago, they know that on 75 there was a real sharp turn there. Real sharp turn that would cause some accidents. And we needed to soften that turn. And that's what ODOT has done very well. Because we'd have trucks. We'd have just-in-time delivery, manufacturing deliveries that would get in accidents or get backed up on the highway. And if they had to get backed up, that meant the plant didn't get their parts that they needed. If the plant didn't get the parts that they needed, the plant had to shut down. that in turn made that plant less attractive to their parent companies to stay open and operating in the Dayton region. We had to solve that problem so we could preserve the business environment for those companies and so that we could keep those jobs right here in the area. And we're very happy that this project is nearing completion. You know, when I'm in my backyard on a Friday night talking to some of my neighbors, they always are yelling at me about the orange barrels and 75s. They know it's something we worked on. But I keep telling them, I go, wait till it's done. You guys are really going to enjoy it when it's done.
Yeah.
Right.
If people knew what it took to get an orange barrel out there, this project started back in about 1999. Help of MVRPC, the chamber. Chris mentioned the curve there at Route 4. There was a dire need that I-75 needed help. It's a main artery, let alone the infrastructure getting aged. We were going to have to be out there anyway to repair what was there. So we're just glad everything came together to repair it with new, get it geometrically improved, to get ingress and egress, you know, more safely out there. So we're really happy that project is where it's at.
Absolutely.
And as we look at these issues with infrastructure, the aging of our infrastructure, we should be thankful for those orange barrels being out there. Christine, you talk a little bit about the issues surrounding infrastructure in the Dayton region, but really this is a nationwide project.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when you talk about, and this is something that we work on at the Chamber that ODOT maybe not necessarily is involved in as we are, but we need to make sure that we're getting the right federal funding that we need in the state, because that money trickles down to our local projects. And if you're not getting the right federal funding through the highway reauthorization bill, then that means we're not getting the funding that we need in a timely manner to be able to manage and fund some of these major projects for infrastructure investments in the Dayton area. You know, it's infrastructure funding. It's a sticky game. You know, there's a lot that goes into it, but businesses have to have confidence in where infrastructure development and maintenance is going to go, so that they know where they can build, where they can relocate their businesses, where they can grow their businesses. And then our departments of transportation, both local and statewide, need to have confidence in their funding streams so they can do long-term planning for a lot of their projects. And if they don't have that confidence, it just makes it very difficult to be able to plan. Now, they're still going to do it, and they're going to do a great job at it with what they have to work with, but it would be a lot easier if we knew that we had a 5 or 6 year highway transportation bill, because it would build confidence in both our governments and our business community that we have a long-term plan.
Yeah, Holly, I want to put a plug in for ODOT here. We've got actually a Jobs and Commerce office. We don't want to be the tail wagging the dog. So from a business perspective, the needs they have to, you know, retain jobs, grow, we want to be at the table when they've got issues and concerns with transportation. You know, my position, you know, we're dealing with getting ready for snow and ice and dealing with other issues. So it's great to have this one office focusing with Chris and his team on business and economic related transportation issues. So I think that's been a real asset to stay involved at the beginning and not once the tail end.
It really is. You know, Randy's always accessible to us at the Chamber, and I mean, heck, his cell phone number's programmed in my phone, and I can call him anytime I need him. But he's also got other issues he's worrying about. He's worrying about buying salt. He's worried about salting roads and shoveling snow and cutting down trees and putting up, you know, barriers and all kinds of good stuff that he needs to do to maintain safety and relieve congestion. But to have somebody directly in his office that we can call when we have a business need, who's going to react to that business need and understands the economic importance of that business is extremely valuable. And this is the first time that ODOT has had this office. It's been under Director Ray, and they've really just done a tremendous job of meeting the needs of the business community.
So would you say opening those lines of communication would be the best way that business community and the Department of Transportation can work together on these infrastructure issues?
Definitely.
Okay. Well, you mentioned a bill, a long-term bill. There is a bill that's sitting in front of Congress right now. Chris, you're involved in public policy very deeply. Can you explain where it stands right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And why it's not going through very quickly?
Sure. Well, in mid-May, there was a continuing resolution put on the highway funding bill that extends it for another 2 months till about mid-July. So probably about the time that the show's being aired, folks that are going to this bill being reconsidered in Congress. And it is the highway funding bill. It helps fund and give money to the local departments of transportations at all the states to help fund major infrastructure projects. Well, that bill needs to be passed with a long-term funding solution, and it hasn't been yet. It hasn't been in Congress yet, and right now that's where that lack of confidence is. So you have lack of confidence in departments of transportation to be able to plan accordingly. You have lack of confidence for local governments to be able to plan accordingly. And then you have a lack of confidence from the business community because they're unsure about infrastructure investments and if their roadways are going to be maintained or not, or if there's going to be new interchanges put in, because they're not getting that steady funding stream from the federal government that they need. It's important to know most of our highway system was built, during World War II or post World War II. So a lot of it, was created really in that 1942, 1944, 1946 eras, and that's been a long time. That's a lot of salt. That's a lot of weather. That's a lot of big trucks that have been going over the road, and the roads need to be repaired and need to be maintained. And things have changed too. More people have vehicles than they did in the 1940s. The trucks are bigger, they're heavier, the weight limits have increased. There's a lot of things that have changed and evolved that have taken a toll on our roadways, and we've got to keep up with them. If we don't keep up with them, then we're going to lose that economic attractiveness that I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Randy, can you say that not having a long-term plan has affected your projects here in District 7 Montgomery County area?
Yeah, Holly, I think what it does for us, it kind of hurts our planning and kind of optimizing our resources because we have to extend them. So we may look at our limited resources, not knowing what's coming down the pike, and therefore do a project that's more of a lot of people call it a Band-Aid or just some minor maintenance, when really what we ought to be doing is a lot more extensive work to the infrastructure, be it a bridge, be it a pavement, be it an intersection. So yeah, it really hampers us to make some good decisions because we're not sure what's coming down the pike.
Right.
And we hate to put money into something and then all of a sudden another project come in, to maybe do more extensive work like add a lane on the interstate and things like that. So it does hurt us.
Chris, with the backlog, we saw in the article in the Dayton Daily News, which I think you have a copy of there.
Yeah, just from last June.
Right. With a backlog that large, can you say why there isn't more enthusiasm for a bill like this in Congress?
Yeah, well, I mean, gosh, everything in Congress is political, Holly, and there there are surprise, surprise, and a lot of the debate is around how you're going to fund a bill and how you're going to fund a long-term funding solution because it's traditionally been funded by gas taxes. And nobody likes to pay taxes. Gosh, we're the chamber. Taxes are the last thing that I like to even say when I'm in a meeting. But sometimes you need to have user fees or taxes to help pay for investments in infrastructure, things that the business community wants to have. And the previous gas tax system seemed to have worked well in funding a lot of those infrastructure investments. However, fuel-efficient vehicles are now very popular in the marketplace. As gas prices increase, you see gas usage decreasing. So as you've had inflation in gas prices, gas usage has decreased. As energy-efficient vehicles have come on the market, gas usage has decreased. So the main funding stream for the highway funding bill is not a stable funding stream because traditional fuel and gas just isn't being used to the extent it was before, which means the taxes are decreasing on that. That then ensues a debate on how do you properly fund a long-term transportation bill? What other user fees are there out there? Some folks in Congress like to see vehicle miles traveled, but then there'd have to be a monitoring system that's able to monitor how many vehicles you travel. Some people don't like that. Others do. Should we increase the gas tax? That's another thing that's under consideration in the federal level. Some folks like that. Some folks don't. Some states have gone to, on the state level, some states have gone to funding transportation through sales tax and other means like that, means of that. That is a debate that will probably have to be taken up at the state level, but it's nothing that's been considered yet here in the state of Ohio, and I don't even know if it is something that should be considered here in the state of Ohio. But they're all options that are on the table that are what's creating this debate. So the debate really is around how do we fund it on the federal level. That debate also trickles down to the local level, though. As you saw from the article we were just talking about in June 15th, roads, bridges need fixing, funds lacking. This is really focused on local projects. This is focused on local projects in Montgomery County where there's a lack of funding to keep up with the county bridges. The county bridges and the county roadways that the county engineer is in charge of. there's not enough funding there to keep up with those projects either. And again, they're having to do a lot of Band-Aid fixes. The Chamber hosted a meeting this past January with all the county engineers from the region to talk about this issue, to see if it was just an urban problem or if it was also existing in our rural communities. And it is existing across the entire region. Every engineer in every county is facing the same lack of funding. So they're trying to explore new solutions on how they can get funding to keep up with the bridges and the roadways as well.
One thing Chris mentioned, we call buying power. With inflation, it's just eroding what we could do. An example is a statistic somebody gave me was a project route about 2007 or 8. Say that project was about 10 million. That same project in 2014 would have been about 14 million. So again, those dollars because of inflation. So whatever funding mechanism, Congress, whoever tries to put together, they must look at the issue of buying power and put a bill in that will deal with that. Not just an amount today, but in 5 years, that amount and that buying power, as you know, with inflation is going to be less. So there's got to be a mechanism to deal with that also.
And I think in conversations with the Montgomery County engineer, he was saying his funding stream, the number of dollars coming into his department hasn't changed, I think, since the 80s.
Yeah.
Do you see the same situation with the Department of Transportation at the statewide level?
It's been pretty streamlined. We've looked at our operating processes. I think that's something that every jurisdiction really needs to do, is analyze what they're doing and how they're doing it and look for ways to get better and streamline it. Government is sometimes scrutinized of not using their resources. We're not profit motivated. It's hard to measure sometimes our results over resources. So that's the first thing. And I know the department has we've cut back on our people. We're doing more with less. So we've really taken some things, that we buy salt with and buy trucks with and tried to move it in to the projects to do our maintenance work. We're looking at probably doing some less treatments on some of our 2-lane roads with lower volumes of traffic. So that's something we're looking at. We're looking at ways to extend those dollars and save on our operating expenses to move it into the projects.
Right.
The department, Randy's exactly right. The Department of Transportation has done a great job of trying to identify resources or cut expenses to try to help save some dollars. Director Jerry Ray, since he's come into ODOT, I know has cut hundreds of $1,000s in internal operating cost, and probably could even be higher than that. I just don't know the exact number right now. But he's made it a priority of his to see what he can do to reduce personnel costs, reduce operating expenses, and really have an efficient department. That way they have more money that they can dedicate towards our roadways. The other thing ODOT has done is they were really innovative this past year and looked at the Ohio Turnpike and tried to see what they could do to identify some new resources from bonding the Ohio Turnpike. So they went forward and did that and were able to identify $1.5 billion in new resources that can be dedicated towards transportation projects by bonding the Ohio Turnpike in the northern part of the state. What's nice about that is that's money that can be used not only around the Turnpike as the legislation deemed, but there's also a percentage of it that can be used throughout the state. And it also frees up other ODOT dollars that can be used across the state and even here down in the Dayton region to fund some much needed transportation projects.
And Chris, I don't think he mentioned was the director and Governor Kasich. They put together a bridge partnership program, $120 million to address county bridge deficiencies. And of course, if you talk to some county engineers, that's just like a drop in the bucket. But it is starting something. It is some dollars to get rid of some of these aging bridges. So it's a step in the right direction.
Have you seen that interest has grown quite a bit in the last couple of years on this issue, as far as government leaders? Has the talk gotten louder as we've gone on the last couple of years?
From my perspective, I have not really seen that. I think from my viewpoint, it's like in the position we're in, we're going to optimize and do the best we can with what we're given. And that may require some inspections that are a little bit more. I was thinking of some of the county bridges, maybe increased inspection. You may have some bridges that have some load limits. You may get some bridges that are closed, and maybe it'll take that to generate the public to get to some of those officials to generate some more dialogue.
Do you see that situation coming soon? Having to close bridges and lower those limits?
I do. I think on some of the local roads, because I have confidence in our engineering community to monitor those bridges. And when it gets to a certain point they're uncomfortable with, close it, you'll detour it around, and maybe that'll stir some interest.
The last thing we want to happen is a tragedy.
Right.
I mean, a tragedy that affects people in this area would be the worst case scenario. We don't want to happen with one of our bridges like what happened out in Minnesota a few years ago, or other bridges across the state where it's been just horrible tragedies. So if the county engineer or ODOT has to close a bridge to prevent that from happening, that's what they need to do. And I agree with Randy. Maybe that's what it will take for people to realize, all right, we need to find a funding solution for this.
And I know the business community, you talked about how involved they are. The Chamber launched just this year a new association called the Dayton Area Logistics Association. And so I'm sure this has been part of their dialogue. The steering committee, I know Jerry Ray came and spoke to that association. Can you talk about their involvement?
The Dayton Area Logistics Association, the reason why we've been flourishing in logistics and distribution is because of our strategic geographic location. We're located right at the intersection of I-70 and I-75. There's a CSX rail line that comes right by that interchange, and then you have the Dayton International Airport with a freight hub and a foreign trade zone right there next to that interchange as well. So you have logistics and distribution companies are trying to get product out that are locating all around that perfect storm of multimodal transportation. The reason they're doing it is because of our efficient transportation network. They know that if they can get a truck on the road, it can get on I-70, it can get on I-75, they can put stuff on freight rail, they can put it in the air very easily. If we lose our transportation network, that's going to devalue our attractiveness as a logistics hub, which will hurt our logistics association. So the logistics association has been very focused on what we can do to maintain investments in our roadways. It's something that's extremely important to them. It's something that they know they need to have, because if the truckers can't get the product to the facility, then the facility, it's not attractive for that facility to be open. And if the truckers can't get the product there and they lose that contract, then the truck tire suppliers lose the contract, then the truck stops and the gas stations don't get the business.
Whole mess of problems.
That's right. It is a domino effect.
Right.
And we've seen a lot of jobs that have come in this region because of logistics and distribution, and we don't want to lose those because of something as simple, and I say that in quotation marks, as roadway improvements.
Right, and that's where that communication comes in between businesses such as those involved in the Dayton Area Logistics Association and the county engineers and the Department of Transportation.
Yeah, but I think, we all need to have a little skin in the game, I call it. I mean, the days of, saying, well, they need to take care of this or they need to take care of that. We all have to have some skin in the game, and so it's changing the dynamics of funding. And so I know Chris and I worked on a situation with the MVRPC to look at maybe some SIB loans and paybacks, and so anyway, we're all going to have to work together on that. One buzzword in the transportation area is systems management and operations. Chris meant how important it is for just in time and moving traffic. So no longer can we stay in our silos of let's design it, let's build it, and then let's maintain it. The big look at is looking at that globally to move traffic. That system, that may be the signs we have telling there's a wreck ahead. Instead of clogging that up, divert. Some states are managing lanes. We're talking about tolling the Brent Spence Bridge to get funding. So there's kind of a new buzz out there on managing our system and just not build, and maintain it.
That's right.
So it's a different look at how we handle the system.
That's right. Yeah, I think Randy's right on track. There's got to be an investment from everybody that's involved in the project, and that's why ODOT and others have been looking at public-private partnerships, but they've also been looking at local investments before they start to put state dollars towards projects. And this is a change. In the past, there have been projects that would receive 100% funding from the state for transportation projects. And now the department has really looked towards making sure everybody has an investment, and they want to see that local commitment. There are projects across the state that have 50% match, 60% match. I mean, significant matches on them. And that's not, you don't have to have that for every project, but it's certainly the more the local community can put into a project, the more attractive they make it for ODOT to help come in and fund the rest of that project. And I know that's something that the department has been pushing very hard with us at the Chamber, as well as with the local communities. Says, make sure you have that local investment. If you have that local investment, then we'll come in and we'll help get the project done. But you've got to have that local skin in the game first.
So you take a creative approach
That's
to
right.
going around getting that funding that you need.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the future?
I do. I think you're seeing it now.
Yeah.
I think, Chris serves on the track board, and I think that's one question they're always asking. Where's the local contribution to this initiative or to this project? And that helps move a project.
It really does. You know what? Speaking of funding and projects that are happening in this region, at the beginning of the year, the Chamber also put together a list that was generated from the business community of the top 10 transportation and interstate needs that the business community would like to see get done. It's a project that has everything from expansion of Route 35 in Montgomery County to new interchanges on 675 to access up at around the logistics companies around the airport. It's got a myriad of different projects totaling about $190 million in projects that the business community would like to see happen over the next 10 years. But we've got to have the funding in place from the federal government to help support them, and we've got to have local matches from our local communities. If the local communities are able to step up and put some skin in the game, the federal government's able to come forth with a long-term funding plan, I think it could really be helpful. And Randy mentioned earlier, MVRPC, our local MPO, helped put together a SIB loan policy and a SIB loan is a state infrastructure bank loan that local governments can get to help fund projects, transportation projects. They actually put together a policy where they will help offset some of that debt from MVRPC for that loan repayback. And the sole purpose of them doing that was to help with that local match that's needed for transportation projects.
Right. I think the key here is getting the conversation started, if not started, pushing it along a little quicker, and I think that's something that the Chamber is very interested in, and I'm sure, Randy, you would like to see that conversation continue as we look at funding and how we're going to fix the infrastructure problem.
Definitely. It's a tough subject, but it's one that we have to keep on the table.
Eventually we're going to have to face it.
Yes.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, I want to thank you both for being with us today. We appreciate your time and your insight on this topic. If you want more information on this topic, you can look at the Chamber's public policy efforts as well as some more information on the Dayton Area Logistics Association. That's all available for you online at DaytonChamber.org, and you can keep updated as we go along here. The Chamber is on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Our Chamber and the business community continue to emphasize the importance of the infrastructure needed in our region that will ensure the growth, retention, and recruitment of businesses and jobs that drive our economy. Infrastructure is a widely defined subject. It may be utilities such as water, sewer, electric and gas, or telecommunications, but it is also our highway system, including our roads, streets, and bridges, air, and rail. Ohio and America need all of these in order to make our complex economy operate. Lately, we've witnessed another stalemate in Washington over passage of the Federal Highway Transportation Funding Bill that leaders just keep on extending on a short-term basis rather than planning out further into the future for our needs and our successes. Long-range planning is imperative if we're to fix, design, and implement our transportation plans, whether they be national or state or local in scope. The business community has a strong working relationship with our Ohio transportation leaders as well as those locally, but we need to voice our opinions more clearly, or maybe more forcefully with Washington, that we need long-term plans and commitments to infrastructure funding, especially transportation, and a better long-term funding plan that will keep America and Ohio strong and competitive.